beginning edge of your double fold binding on this line. So we've matched it up there. And then I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to, in the groove, this binding is 2.5 inches. In the groove that's marked 2.5 inches, we're actually going to mark a line. You can use 3-inch binding, for example. I know a lot of quilters like the thicker binding for flannel quilts, for example, or on a baby quilt if they just want to make a bigger binding around the edge. The 1.25 inch binding is for single fold binding.
Okay.
And typically that's bias. You're using that when you do your scallops. So those marks are all here. We're going to use the 2.5 inch mark, and I've put that there. I'm going to put a pin so that I remember. You'll see that there's a line on one side. Now, you don't want to use a ballpoint pen. Ballpoint pens bleed through the fabric.
Oh, no, 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 no.
Use a pencil. It's the easiest thing to work with, and it will come out. But it's also on the inside where we won't see it when it wraps around to the other side. So that's our starting point. And we're also going to mark the end here of the gizmo.
Oh, so you've put the 2.5 at where you put your mark for your 2.5.
And I just have that there for a reference point, and you'll see that when we come back around. Now, I want you to start sewing at the bottom pin here.
Oh, really? Okay.
Now, it shows how to do this in the book, picture by picture by picture.
Good, we like that.
When you put your binding on, remember to sew only to, you can just take this roll. The nice part about the rolls is they'll sit right in front of you next to your sewing machine.
Without having all these long trains.
Right.
Yes. Now, do I back tack here?
Yes, do back tack. And when you do this, you're only going to sew to, we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam, and we're going to back tack.
Oops. Which one am I using?
There you go.
There we go.
And you're going to sew to 1/4 inch before the end and back tack again.
Okay.
Now on a Bernina, you've got a notch there that tells you on the foot. So
this has a very handy little notch. There we go.
And back tack.
Okay.
And then take it out of the machine.
Got it.
And we do this on every corner. That's the other reason you want to do a small project, because you can really get some good practice. And then bring this over. Now this is the part where most quilters have trouble getting the corners to work right. We're going to create a mitered corner with the sewing. And what we want to do is make sure that we fold it just right. Here's how you fold it. You pull it up, and what you're looking for here is this line right here.
Oh,
you want the edge of your raw edge, the raw edge of your binding to actually be even with the raw edge of your quilt where you're sewing next. Then you're going to fold it down. And when you fold it down, that fold needs to be even with the raw edge that you just sewed.
Okay.
Where you run into problems is if you, and I see this quite often, you push this up too far, and now it's way above the raw edge. You can't tuck that much fabric into the miter on the back.
It'll be a mess.
Exactly.
Big lump.
Big lump. And those are called bowling balls in the corner.
Okay.
Along the edge, it's a bowling ball and a snake, and then the others, And if you pull it down too far and don't have that fold across the top, well then of course you won't have enough fabric to turn it on the corner.
You'll end up with a round corner.
Exactly. So what we want to do is make sure that this matches evenly with the top edge. I put a pin in just to hold it. Let me tell you another problem that most quilters experience here. Generally speaking, you're going to sew right off that edge and just start down. You don't start at 1/4 inch. You just literally sew down. When you do that, most often the feed dogs will pick up this fabric and fold it under.
Oh.
Let me tell you an easy way to solve that problem. You start 1 inch down, back tack first, and then go the full length.
Okay.
Keeps those corners from folding over.
That makes perfect sense.
Yes. So go ahead and do that. Just start a little bit further down. And starting further down like that will just keep the fabric smooth and flat, which is what we're looking for.
Yes. Oops, there we go. And we just sew all the way down?
All the way to the 1/4 inch mark again.
Okay. Okay, we're coming up on it.
When you get to the 1/4 inch mark, back tack.
One more stitch. There we go.
Some people know it as back stitching too. Not something that's used very often in quilting.
It's from sewing. If you're from the sewing world.
Right.
You know.
But on binding, that's one of the places that you do. So now you can see that we have an absolutely perfect miter on the front. And when we do the other side, it's going to, see, it's a perfect 45-degree angle.
Yep.
And they'll just fold right over each other on the back side, and
it'll be gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah, nice corner. Okay, let's do the other 2 corners really quick.
Okay.
And I'm going to let you do it this time. Now remember, before you put it in your machine,
Oh
you
yeah.
want to fold it.
First gotta fold it, and I fold it up straight.
So that your raw edges on the seam that you're going to sew are even. And then you fold it straight down. And you make sure that that fold is even. Very good. Now the pin just holds it until you're ready to...
And you put it in from the inside towards the outside.
I do, and that's perfect.
Okay.
And then you start a 1/2 inch down.
Back up.
Back up first, and then just sew right on down. How much easier can it get?
It really is easy. Once you get the method, you just go right ahead and do it.
One thing I've learned about quilting is that any tips and tricks that you can pick up from experienced quilters will just make it that much easier for you. You don't have to learn it all over again. Just learn it from someone who knows.
And we might as well use their wisdom and not learn it on our own.
Very good.
Okay.
And we'll just
Do another
reuse
one?
this pin.
Straight up
Yes.
and then down.
Very good.
And put the pin in at an angle.
We have 2 more corners, and then we're going to put it together.
All right. This is easy.
Yes, and this will be your dinner placemat.
So you could, when you're practicing this, quilt enough for like 4 placemats so you have a lot to practice with.
Yes.
And then by the time you finish those, you'll be an expert at binding.
Yes. You should never learn a technique. You should never learn a technique on a quilt. You should always learn it on something that you can, that doesn't matter. And then by the time it does matter, you're so comfortable with it,
That you know how to do it.
Exactly. All right, we're coming to the last turn. And so what we're going to do here is make the turn, and I only want you to sew down. Let me just move this out of your way for you. I only want you to sew down just about 1.5 inches because we have to leave enough room to connect those 2 pieces.
Okay. So I'll start.
On a quilt, you would start quite a bit further down, but on a small project, we just need a little bit of squeaky room there.
Is that enough?
Yep, and just back tack if you would.
Okay.
There you go.
Got it.
All right, now let's see about joining them together. We have an awful lot of fabric left over for our binding, and we want to get rid of that. But how do we know what length to cut so that we get a perfect bias seam?
I bet the tool tells us.
It will. It will. Usually what we do, and what I've done most of my life most of my quilting life, is I get all the way around and I either give it to someone who knows how to do that, and then I don't want to watch for fear of actually learning how to, or what I've mostly done is a straight seam. But again, a straight seam is going to do what? It defeats the purpose of the bulk, which is what we're trying to get rid of. The tool tells you how to measure those 2 strips so that when you put them together, you get a perfect fit. So let's go ahead and do that. This was where we started, and we made our mark at 2.5 inches. And then this just gives us room to work. What we're going to do now is we're going to put this over. Now you want the back strip, which is where we started, to peek out just a little bit.
Okay.
And it explains that in the book and has a really good picture to show you how to do that. What we're going to do now is the same thing that we did before, only the strip has come all the way around and is on top.
Right.
So we've lined up our solid line on the binding strip underneath, the raw edge. We're going to mark this again at the same 2.5 mark, and again, the reason we're using the 2.5 inch hole is because we're using
2.5 inch wide binding strips.
Exactly. Okay, so that's where we're going to cut it.
Oh.
Now, I'm comfortable with doing this, so I don't mind cutting the fabric. But remember that once you cut it, if you cut it too short, you don't have any options. That's why I like this tool, because it is exact every single time. I never have to think about it. And trust me when I say I have miscut these enough times that I'm thankful that there's a tool now that will do it right.
I've done it, I don't know how many times.
Oh, good. So you know what I'm talking about. Well, for the sake of today, I'm going to show you how it works before I cut it. And what we're going to do, there's a line here that we've drawn on just half the binding. And then there's a line here that we've drawn that's on just half the binding. You want to lay your strip exactly on that line. So this is where my line is, and in the book it tells you that you put the top binding strip to the left of the line.
Okay.
What happens if you put it to the right of the line is it's too
short.
big.
Too big.
Too big.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, that's right, big, because this is the long one. Yes.
Right, and because we're not cutting it off because we're not sure yet, you wouldn't know but to which
until
side
you've
put
done it, and then
Yes. So we're going to put it on here. Now, the line underneath, whoops, it's on this side. The line underneath that we drew on the starting strip actually goes flat against the bottom edge of the one that we're just finishing. So this is how you're going to piece this together. Now remember, if you have trouble remembering which way to sew your seam, just go like this and it will tell you.
Oh, that's right. Go back to the binding gizmo.
Go back to the gizmo and it gives you the orientation on how to sew it together. We're going to pin this.
This tool is your friend.
It's my friend. I thought once we made it that I wouldn't need it anymore, and I find myself going to it time and time again now. It's a great reference tool. And again, we're going to sew from this corner to this corner. We're going to open this up just a little bit. We started...
Got a little too close. This is an awfully small project to do this on. So you're going to rip out the seam a little bit so we have some more
Just a little. So we have just a little elbow room.
That always looks scary.
You know,
using a rotary cutter for that.
It's the fastest way to do
I
it,
know.
and it's very safe. Okay.
It is.
It's very safe. All right. So what I'm going to have you do is sew from one corner to the next.
Okay. Okay. There we go. And do I backstitch? Does it matter?
You don't have to on this one.
Okay.
It's just like a regular seam. You wouldn't backstitch on
Oh,
there.
sure, because we're going to be stitching over it again.
And I put a pin at the bottom corner so that you have
So
a
I can
reference
aim.
point to shoot for.
Take these pins out as I go. And you could mark these lines if you felt that you wanted
If you
to have
and
something
also
to
on a
sew
bigger project, you'd have more room to work with.
Yes. There we go. Cut that off, and now we get our big reveal.
Yes, the big reveal. And what you'll notice once we cut this fabric off is that it is perfect.
It's absolutely perfect.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
So here's a finished sample of what it looks like when it's all done. And what I always use as a test for my students and for myself is if I can't figure out which seam is the beginning or the ending, then I know I've done a good job.
That's right.
Yes, so
That's right.
you look at this and tell me if you can tell where I started or stopped.
Absolutely not.
Good. Then we did a good job on this one. And the Binding Gizmo is the tool that helps us do that.
Absolutely. Do you have a needle and thread? Can you show us how to turn the
Yes, I can.
binding to the back?
Let me just have a piece of thread off of here.
Okay.
We have an example that's already done.
Good. We got about a minute.
I can do it in 30 seconds.
Let's see how quickly she can thread a needle on camera. Not that there's any pressure here or anything.
Well, if I had a clipped end, of course it's under pressure. There we go.
Now I would imagine that having the binding sewn on so well will make it easier to do your hand sewing on the back.
It really does. When you get ready to push this to the back side, I use these binding clips, which I think as youngsters we used as hair clips. And I put them on like so, and I sew ahead of myself. And you just come up underneath, and you can either do a ladder stitch. You can either do a ladder stitch or just tack it down.
Oh, and just go through.
Yes.
Okay.
The book also has some great instructions on how to sew it down by machine. So many of us, by the time we finish sewing a quilt top and putting it all together, our hands are tired. And it can take several hours to put binding on by hand to the back. The book has very clear instructions and pictures on how to sew the quilt binding to the back, or you can bring it around to the front and use a decorative stitch.
Oh, great. Lots of options.
Yes, lots of ideas.
Good. Well, where can we find the book and your tool?
It's available through some distributors now, and it is always available on our website, which is www.quiltingdelights, and that's QUILTING DELIGHTS.com.
Great.
Lots of other great ideas there too.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
here. I've learned a lot about binding, and I think now I'm going to really, with the help of the tool, have perfect bindings every time.
Good. I'll look forward to seeing your quilts.
Okay, thanks,
All
Taya.
right. Thanks, Jody.
And thank you for watching Quilter's Tea on QNN. See you next time. One of the cameramen wanted we just chat last night. Yeah, that he was saying.
I know. That's what they always look at.